Does anyone have a question?
I'm curious about how back in the day, students would go to ashrams. And I'm just curious, did it make those students deeper?
I guess some of them, yes, made me deeper. I spent 9 years running an ashram in Texas, and it was an incredible training ground for me. But I also discovered a very important and interesting thing about ashrams is that people often go to ashrams and monasteries and, as a place of hiding out, a place where they don't have to really go out and deal with the world and deal with all the stuff that life presents. And that really used to bother me when I lived in Texas. And when I moved back to New York, I decided that I will run a meditation center, but not an ashram. Communal living, communal everything together, but I won't do that again. Because I discovered most of the people in those situations were really hiding out from life. And the whole point of this is to get strong enough to where you can live in the world and you can be part of a meditation center or even an ashram. But at the same time, one isn't hiding out there. Look, I learned a great deal living in ashrams, a very important part of my training and growth. I think the world is much different today than it was in the 1970s. People are much different. The way people live today is much different. I don't know, I'm not quite sure that communal living, almost fits into the world that we live in today. But when I did it, it was very good, and it really taught me a great deal. Being part of Rudy's ashram, living in Rudy's house, taught me a great deal. That year was one of the great educational periods of my life. Being close to him, being around him, being in constant touch with that Shakti and that energy is very important. But in today's world, ashram is a word. It's who the teacher is. It's what you're getting out of the place. What kind of depth does it take you to? Are you growing because you're there? Or is it just an ashram and supposedly a spiritual place? To me, that is more important than what something is called. Is one's presence in a situation like that really helping them get closer to God? Or is it just a way of kind of hiding out from the world? I mean, Big Indian was a lot of that. I'm telling you, it was just unbelievable what used to go on up there. And I would say 70% of the people there were hiding out from the world. Communal life, food was made, they worked, Rudy's ashrams were always hard work. People that lived in the Denton ashram, they worked very, very hard. Ran restaurants and bakeries and, it was, I don't know, it has Bob Sink and Tom Tompkins, they'll tell you, Richard Zalazzi, they'll tell you. I mean, sometimes the days were 10 and 12 hours long. Building a house we built down there. So do people benefit? Yes, they benefit. But the most important thing is what they take away from it. Have they grown? Have they changed? Have they deepened their connection with spirit by being part of a situation like that? That to me is the most important thing. Not spending the rest of one's life living in an ashram. And as I say, an ashram is just a word. It has spiritual connotations, but I mean, look, I've told this story before, and it's interesting. When I went to Sanada, I told you about Kala Rinpoche and what happened. And there were 300 monks sitting in the courtyard. And Kala Rinpoche was in bed. He was dying. He was, and they're all with their yapa beads and prayer wheels, etc. And I asked him if we could go see the Rinpoche. And they said, yeah. He spoke to Kala Rinpoche and he said, yes. Kala Rinpoche wasn't dying. He was like a cow that needed to be milked, for God's sake. And being there and opening and receiving the depth of teachings that human being had to give, it brought him back to life again. And he told me, he said to me something I'll never forget, and it's really a truth. He said when he was a young tulku, if he went to see his Rinpoche, he'd have to wait hours because there were so many monks that had questions. He said, today I can't find anyone to teach. And Rudy had the same complaint. I used to hear Rudy say the same thing. He said, look, if my students don't want it, I'll leave it in a Chinese restaurant. The waiter will come, pick up a dish, and get Shakti running through his whole system. Rudy looked at it with a sense of humor, but I mean, this thing almost killed this incredible teacher who just needed to be milked, for God's sake. So it's not ashrams, it's the teacher, and it's the teacher and what you get from them, and are they giving you what you need to get to God? That really is the determining factor, not the word ashram or monastery or lamasery or anything of that nature. It's what you put into it and what you extract from it. What you demand from the teacher, and also what the teacher is capable of really giving. That to me is a very important factor. And I learned years ago, not to delude myself with so-called spiritual situations. What am I receiving there? What depth of inner work is it giving to me? How deep do I need to grow? And what can I extract from, and of course, sitting around Rudy, the energy was so powerful all the time that I didn't need to be reminded. I was just in the middle of it, and I had to go deep enough in myself to build a system to be able to absorb what he was giving to me. And this to me was extraordinary. It was exactly why I was there. I hope that's clear, because you can make anything work for you. I offered in-person classes, a few people came, that's it. I know for some of you it's expensive to come across the country, to stay in hotels. But, it's not like it's a daily expense. It's, take advantage of what is being offered. I would really love to run a spiritual center again. I don't want to run an ashram and I don't want to run a commune. But I would love to have a center where there could be regular classes at a certain time and like I used to run for so many years. And who knows, it might happen. I don't know. I never know what's going to happen, tomorrow, I just stay open and grow and really try to do my service to God in any way that's made possible. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask?
Hi, Stuart. You
Yes.
you mentioned demanding from the teacher, and I just wanted to ask a little more of that, because as a student, we feel humble, right? Learning from the teacher, and then I like that you share demanding from the teacher that comes from a place of power. Can you please talk about that?
Well, they say by asking you will receive. You understand? Go to a teacher. And that teacher, has the Shakti, the energy to help you build a spiritual life. If you don't sit down and ask for it, it's not going to come to you. You have to have that need inside. Look, I said this before. Look, in 6 years of being with Rudy, I never had a conversation with him. I never was interested in having a conversation with him. And I was interested in getting the Shakti. So when I was around him, I would receive that energy. That's all I wanted. And that energy I received helped a pretty emotionally crippled person when I was younger, put together a system inside that was strong enough that without having a conversation with Rudy, he made me a teacher. He knew what I needed and he nurtured it. But I had to show him that. And he had patience to deal with a very gypsy, crazy Stuart that I was, when I was younger. And he used to bust my chops and do all kinds of things that used to get me upset, but I knew what he was doing. He was making me get past me. Being strong enough to deal with anything that the world sends my way. And without that kind of training, forget about it. I would have been dead, 25 years ago. But it was a combination of his energy, my need, and my asking internally for help to have a spiritual life, to be around this great being who had the Shakti, the energy, to train me in how to do it, and then demanding. I wanted that. Look, the single most difficult thing on this planet is to have a spiritual life. Everything virtually on this planet works against it. It's intangible. It's beyond anything a human being can understand. It's infinite in the universe. It transcends birth and death, all material things, emotional things, family, friendships, transcends everything. And it's so far beyond anything any of us can understand that it takes that kind of inner demand, that inner thing that says, I need to grow. And then, taking what is provided for one and using it and never taking it for granted. And that's true humility. Because in order to get from a teacher, you have to have gratitude. You have to have humility. You have to give something from yourself. I remember once I was in an ashram in southern Rajasthan in India to see this teacher named Babaji, his name was. And, when I finally met him, it took a few hours to met him. He was a very powerful teacher. And I knew I had to give him a present. I knew it. And I had this very beautiful coral Ganesh that I used to wear, with a gold chain and and it was worth a lot of money. And I said, it was the only thing I had, and I had to give him something. So I took it off and gave it to him. What came back was, very extraordinary weekend of deep teachings and transformation. So it's all of these things that make it, it's not ashrams. It's not churches, it's not sinning, it's what you give to them and what you take out of the situation. That really is the key to the whole thing. I had a laugh the other day because a friend of mine is running an auction and she had one of these Ganeshas in it that I gave estimated $4,000 to $8,000. I said, this, this is a long time ago, it was back in the 90s. But I started to laugh and thinking, well, but it was inexpensive in comparison to what I received from this person.
Thank you, Stuart.
You're welcome. And you got to find this in yourself. It's always easy to find excuses not to do. I'm this, I'm that, I don't have money, I don't have this, I got a date, I stubbed my toe, I have family coming. There's always a million reasons for not doing. And if you really sweep all of, there's always an hour to do. There's always an hour to come to meditation, and everyone will understand it. There's always an hour to do something that will benefit your spiritual life. Excuses are very easy. You're a dime a dozen. I got this, I got that, I can't, my toe hurts. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? No, I hope this is all clear because I'm of the belief that one has to take advantage of the gifts of God and what is put into their life, and never, ever for a second take it for granted. A lot of people took Rudy for granted. Oh, he's going to be here another 40 years. I don't need to go to meditation. This. One day he was gone. He was gone. Does anyone else have a question?
Spoken before about the ladder that you can, on the way to enlightenment and stepping off or continuing up. Can you speak about that?
Well, it's like an elevator in an apartment. You can go get off at any floor and shove, where you can get back on the Kundalini elevator and ride it all the way to enlightenment. You get out and shop and do it, and then I mean, we all have to work. We have to make money. We have family. We have all kinds of stuff. That's part of the, floors in the department store, the spiritual department store. So we need to do these things. But all of these things should be a reminder to return to the elevator so that you keep moving in an upward direction. Not to get swept away. And, I read a book of poems of Rumi about a week ago, 10 days ago, big book, thick book. And all he talked about was this, how people get swept away in the illusion. They get swept away in the Maya, never remembering to go back to the source, getting lost in it. So yes, there's a ladder that leads to enlightenment, but it takes us to many different floors in the spiritual department store, the department store of life. And people all too often get lost in the shopping. They get swept away into all of the stuff and forget what made it possible for them to even be on that floor. Does anyone else? And I'm not against shopping. I'm not against anything, really. I mean, it's all part of life and we need to learn from it. But I really am of the belief that everything should be a reminder that we have to go back inside and build a chakra system that enables the elevator to keep going up into the cosmos and into the arms of God. Okay, if there are no more questions, then there'll be a meditation on Wednesday. And thank you, and God bless you all for being part of this. And as I always say, this is a great miracle for me to sit here and do this with all of you and to allow you to be my team. I mean, you drag all of this out of me, and I just am so grateful for it. It's just an endless amount of teaching and learning and growing. And it makes me more humble, it doesn't make me more important. It really builds a humility and a gratitude in me. I'm very grateful for that. So God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. So are we. Love
Thank
you.
you.
So
Thank
much.
Good day. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Good night.